Hi students. In this session, I will analyze thermodynamics second law of thermodynamics only. Now actually a small question for you. Is it possible to score 100% in second law of thermodynamics in both JEE mains and JEE advanced? Yes, it is possible. My answer is yes, but provided two conditions are satisfied. One is time and second one is analysis and practice. So the first one you have, all of you have, more than sufficient time you have. And second one, I told you the second one is analysis and practice. Analysis of the theoretical statements, understanding them and practicing the numericals. There are hardly 2 or 3 formulae in second law of thermodynamics. So if you practice plenty of numericals based on those 2 or 3 formulae, and if you analyze the theoretical statements, if you understand them, yes, it is possible to score 100%. Now actually in this session, I will analyze 3 or 4 statements and I will solve 6 or 7 questions. So listen to me carefully. Thermodynamics, second law. So the first statement which I am analyzing is both matter and energy tend to disperse. Both matter as well as energy tend to disperse. Actually, in second law, second law talks about entropy, and entropy means disorder, randomness. So you already have an idea, actually matter tends to disperse. So that is what is meant by entropy increases. One of the statements of second law of thermodynamics is entropy of the universe increases. Energy of the universe is constant, but entropy of the universe increases. So obviously when matter has a tendency to disperse, so entropy of the universe increases. Both are same. Okay. And here in this statement, there is one more thing which has a tendency to get dispersed, that is energy. So matter and energy both have a tendency to get dispersed. Now let us take 2 examples, in fact 3 examples. So the first example is, we have a gas A. This bulb is connected to an evacuated bulb of some volume. There is a stopcock. Now as long as the stopcock is closed, the gas A remains in the left hand side bulb. Now this is the initial situation. Now if you open the stopcock, just open the stopcock, you need not do anything else. Just open the stopcock. So then the gas occupies both the vessels. Now here some amount of A is there here and some amount of A is there here. Now this stopcock is open. Now this stopcock is closed. So spontaneously, the gas A spontaneously gets dispersed. Now it will occupy both the vessels. So this is what is meant by matter tends to disperse. So this is spontaneous process. It happens on its own. No amount of work needs to be done from above, from outside. So that is what is meant by spontaneous process. So the matter tends to disperse. Okay. Now this is the initial situation and this is the final situation. And you know, entropy of this system is greater than entropy of this system, because now the gas has more volume to occupy. So more entropy, more disorder, more randomness. Now for example, in the second example, let me take a metallic rod like this and another metallic rod like this. So let us say this is A, this is B, and TA is greater than TB. Now this is the initial situation. They are not in contact with each other. Both are metal rods. They are at different temperatures. Temperature of A is greater than that of B, and they are not in contact with each other. Okay. Now the final situation is, now bring them into contact with each other. Now this is A, this is B. Now this is the final situation. Now all of you know, energy flows from A to B. Energy in the form of heat flows from A to B, because A is at higher temperature, B is at lower temperature. And this process occurs spontaneously. This process occurs on its own without our interference from outside until the temperatures of both the blocks become same. So TA is equal to TB. Now actually initially more amount of energy is concentrated here, because that is at higher temperature. Now when this metal block is brought into contact with another metal block which is at a lower temperature, now the energy gets dispersed. So now both come at both will be at same temperature. The system comes to equilibrium. So here in this example, energy has dispersed. In this example, matter has dispersed. So matter and energy both have a tendency to get dispersed. Now this is one of the basic observation in thermodynamics, and this is one of the basic things about entropy. Both matter and energy have a tendency to get dispersed. Okay, but why? Why matter has a tendency to get dispersed? This question is same as asking why the entropy of the universe increases. Both mean the same thing actually. See, it is a different way of asking the same thing. Why matter has a tendency to get dispersed? Why energy has a tendency to get dispersed? Why entropy of the universe increases? Let me take a small example. Suppose we have some plastic cards numbered 1 to 50. On one of the cards there is a number 1, another card number 2, like that until 50, 1 to 50. Now suppose initial situation, let us see initial situation and final situation. So there also initially these cards are arranged in a perfect order, 1, 2, 3, 4, so on, 49, 50. Now that is the initial situation. Now what do? You start shuffling them, randomly mixing, which is called as shuffling. So you start shuffling them and you go on shuffling them like that. Now just imagine, all of you just tell me, what is the probability of getting this particular order, the initial order? What is the probability of getting it back? Will you get that? By shuffling like that, randomly mixing them, shuffling like that, will you get that order back? The order which you started with. 1, 2, 3, 4, 49, 50. Will you get that back? No. So matter has a tendency to get dispersed. Actually here the reason for dispersal is whether it is plastic cards or a gas or this energy in this case, the reason here is simply the probability. Let me explain that with that example. It is very simple. Now, in how many ways you can arrange the cards like this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so on, 49, then 50 in a perfect order. In how many ways you can arrange the cards like that? Only one. And in how many ways you can arrange the cards randomly? First 1, then 34, then 49, then 12, then 13, like that in a random way. In how many such ways you can arrange those cards? Thousands, lakhs. Total number of ways in which you can arrange those cards, except this way. This is only one way. This way you can arrange the cards, this is the only one way. But in how many other ways you can arrange them randomly? Hundreds, thousands, lakhs. So, random arrangement, we have so many ways in which the cards can be randomly arranged. But we have only one way in which they are orderly arranged, in which they can be orderly arranged. So, which event has higher probability of happening? The one with 1 lakh different ways, the one with 10 lakh different ways, or the one with only one way? Obviously, the one with multiple ways, huge number. So, this system, this arrangement has high probability of occurring, high probability of happening, so that happens. And this event, this arrangement has a very small probability of occurring, so it does not happen. Its probability is almost 0, so it does not happen. And its probability is almost 1, so it happens. So the disorder, randomness, entropy can be explained simply with the help of probability. So in the case of matter dispersal, in the case of energy dispersal, you can take any example like that, which in which the entropy is involved. All such examples can be explained with probability. So this is our first statement. Matter and energy both have a tendency to get dispersed. Now come to the second statement, which we are going to analyze. First, let me write down that statement. Entropy of an isolated system increases until the process in the system comes to equilibrium. Now this is second important statement in second law of thermodynamics. So if you take an isolated system and suppose in that system there is a spontaneous process occurring, and as long as this spontaneous process occurs, entropy increases. Once the system comes to equilibrium, entropy stops increasing. That means at equilibrium the entropy is maximum. It goes on increasing until there is an irreversible process. You know, irreversible process means spontaneous process. Once the system reaches equilibrium, then entropy remains constant. So entropy is maximum at equilibrium. Now this is another important statement in the second law. Now actually to explain this, I am not going to take any chemical reaction, which is in fact complicated to analyze. Let me take a very simple example which all of us can understand. In fact, an example which all of us have observed so many times. An example which is quite obvious to all of us. So with the help of that, let me explain this. Okay, suppose we have two systems which are separated by a wall, fixed wall, immovable. And this entire system is surrounded by adiabatic and rigid wall. This is adiabatic and rigid. And this wall is fixed. So that means volumes of both the systems, they are constant. Volume of this is also constant, volume of this is also constant. Now let us say this is system A and this is system B. Actually both the systems may contain gas, they may contain liquid, they may contain solid. It is immaterial. You can just simply take both systems as iron rods. Simply two iron rods, two metallic rods. You can take anything. Okay. Now these two systems are large systems, very large. Actually, I am taking the systems as very large because of one small approximation which I will make later on. That I will tell you. But A and B are large systems. Now this is one simple experiment. Temperature of A, let us say TA, temperature of B, let us say TB. Internal energy of A, UA, internal energy of B, UB. So like that, entropy, temperature, internal energy, entropy. Okay, so here can I write down? Suppose if A is at high temperature, then heat energy flows from left to right. And suppose B is at high temperature. If B is at high temperature, then heat energy flows from right to left, from A to B or B to A, depending upon the temperature difference. If both are at same temperature, then there is no heat flow. There is no net heat flow. Even when they are at same temperature, heat flows from A to B and B to A, but net heat flow is zero. And when A is at high temperature, there is a net heat flow from left to right. When B is at high temperature, then there is a net heat flow from right to left. Okay. Now I can write down here DUA, infinitesimally small change in the internal energy of A. Now that can be written, that can be taken as that is equal to dW reversible. Actually, I have taken the systems to be very large because whatever happens between those two can be taken as a reversible process. Because when the system is very large, the amount of heat transferred is infinitesimally small. So we can take the process as reversible process. Whatever whatever the nature of the process that happens, may be reversible. If it is reversible, no problem. Even if it is irreversible, we can take it as reversible because we have taken the systems to be very large. So dW reversible plus dQ reversible. First law of thermodynamics. This is a fixed partition. Now this outer wall is rigid. So volume of A is constant, volume of B is constant. So as a result, there is no way either A can do work or B can do work. There is no way. A and B cannot do any work because their volumes are constant. So dW reversible becomes 0 and dQ reversible can be written as TA into dSA. Q reversible is equal to T delta S. So dQ reversible is equal to T ds. TA is the temperature of A, and dSA is the infinitesimal small change in the entropy of A because of the heat transfer. Now similarly you can write down dUB is equal to the same dW reversible plus dQ reversible. Now that is equal to TB dSB. Now if you want to see the total change in entropy of the entire system A and B together, this entire isolated system, can I call it as isolated system? The entire system is isolated? Yes, no doubt. Because the walls are adiabatic, no way heat can flow into or out of the system. The walls are rigid, no way you can do work on it, or the system can do work, there is no way. So no work, no heat, so the system is isolated. So if you want to see the entropy change inside this isolated system, now we can write down the total entropy change. ds is equal to dSA plus dSB, change in entropy of A and change in entropy of B, summation of those two. So now this can be written as dSA is equal to dUA upon TA. Similarly, dSB is equal to dUB upon TB. Now we can write down this is equal to dUA upon TA minus dUA upon TB. Because whatever the loss in internal energy of A will be the gain in internal energy of B. Because the system is isolated, no work is done, no heat is flowed either into or out of the system. So whatever may be the loss, whatever may be the gain in the internal energy, whatever may be the change in internal energy of A is nothing but equal to minus of the change in internal energy of B. The same thing. So we can write this, let me write down this in brackets. This is because dUA is equal to minus dUB. We can write down this as dUA into 1 upon TA minus 1 upon TB. Now all of you see this final result. So ds is equal to dUA into 1 upon TA minus 1 upon TB. Now see, can I write down ds is positive when TA is greater than TB? Yes. If TA is greater than TB, heat flows from left to right. Then what will be the sign of the dUA? Negative. Because heat is flowing from left to right. There will be a loss in the internal energy of the system A. So final minus initial, so obviously it is negative. So dUA is negative. Because TA is greater than TB, this is negative. 1 upon TA minus 1 upon TB comes out to be negative. So then ds is positive. Now you can write down the same ds to be positive even when TA is less than TB. And in that case, the heat flows from right to left. So dUA will be positive because there is a gain in internal energy of A. So dUA will be positive and 1 upon TA minus 1 upon TB will be positive. So ds comes out to be positive. So no matter whose temperature is higher, the change in the internal energy of the entire system is positive. That means entropy is increasing. Entropy is increasing, and if TA is greater than TB, yes, this is a spontaneous direction of heat flow. If TB is greater than TA, now opposite is the spontaneous direction of heat flow. But in any case, the process in that isolated system is spontaneous, irreversible. So entropy increases. Now, can I write down ds is equal to 0 when TA is equal to TB? When TA is equal to TB, no heat flow, so dUA is equal to 0 and this entire expression becomes 0 in brackets. That is also 0, so ds is equal to 0. So when TA is equal to TB, then the system is at equilibrium. Now see, Now, in the first two cases, the process is irreversible, and another word for irreversible, spontaneous. But only thing is that in the first case, the spontaneous direction is left to right. In the second case, the spontaneous direction is right to left. That's the only thing, but the process is happening spontaneously. And in the third case, the process is reversible and the system is at equilibrium. Now you see the final result. As long as there is a spontaneous process or irreversible process, the entropy increases in an isolated system. Once the process comes to equilibrium, then entropy stops increasing. ds is 0. So that means entropy gets maximized. Now suppose if you draw a graph between S universe, you can say simply let us take S, entropy of the system. Now here time. Now this graph looks like this. It goes on increasing as long as there is irreversible process, and it remains same once the system reaches equilibrium. So now from here to here, it is irreversible, and irreversible has another word, that is spontaneous, and from here to here it is reversible, and the system has reached equilibrium. So once the system reaches equilibrium, the entropy is maximum, because after that there is no further increase. This is for an isolated system. And here one small modification in this graph. Is an isolated system, is a perfect isolated system possible? No, theoretically we can explain that, but can you make it practical in the laboratory? No. So, perfect example for an isolated system is this universe. So, what we can do is, if you want to remove this condition isolated system, then here you can write down S universe, which is also called as S total. So, for all practical systems, when entropy of the system and entropy of the surroundings, sum of these two values, the total entropy, which is also called as entropy of the universe. So, entropy of the universe or total entropy increases in an irreversible process. And now please mind it, entropy of the system may decrease during an irreversible process, during a spontaneous process. But entropy of the surroundings, if it is positive, if it is more in magnitude, if the sum comes out to be positive, that is sufficient. If the total entropy is positive, yes, then that is spontaneous. Individually, entropy of the system may be positive, may be negative, entropy of the universe may be positive, may be negative. But the only condition is that the total must come out to be positive. So, the total entropy is positive for a spontaneous process, and total entropy remains 0, change in entropy, change in total entropy remains 0 for a reversible process. Or you can say the total entropy remains constant for a reversible process. You can understand it like that. Okay. So, that is the meaning of this particular sentence. Entropy of an isolated system increases. If you remove this, then you just write down total entropy. Yeah, total entropy increases, entropy of the system plus entropy of the surroundings, until the process in the system comes to equilibrium. And once it reaches equilibrium, then entropy stops increasing and the change in entropy becomes 0 once the system is in equilibrium. Now the third one. What is the difference between delta G and delta G naught? Actually here the question is the common doubt in the minds of the students. Majority of the students have this doubt. That is, who decides the spontaneity? It is delta G or delta G naught? Now this is the question. What is the difference between delta G and delta G naught, and out of these two, who will decide the spontaneity? Okay. Now let me explain, first let me define them, both of them, delta G as well as delta G naught. Obviously the difference between both of them is very minor difference, actually standard conditions, non-standard conditions. But what they signify in that particular thing, they are very much different. Okay. Suppose first if you come to delta G, and suppose we have a reaction that is A gives B. Let me take very simple reaction, the simplest reaction possible. A gives B and it is a balanced reaction. Now if you want to write down its delta G expression, delta G for this reaction, then it is nothing but free energy of B minus free energy of A. In fact, it is molar free energy. It is also molar free energy, so the units will be joules per mole. You all know that in thermodynamics and in thermochemistry, absolute enthalpy, absolute internal energy, absolute free energy cannot be determined. So we can change this particular expression this way: delta F G of B, free energy of formation of B minus free energy of formation of A. And conceptually this does not make any difference. It is exactly this G values are replaced with formation values, delta F G values, not approximately, accurately. You have to be very confident about that. Okay, so this is how we define delta G. And if it comes to delta G naught, then again same thing. G naught of B, again G naught molar, joules per mole, minus G naught of A. Again we can replace this G naught values with formation values. Delta F G naught of B, standard free energy change in the formation of B, minus delta F G naught of A. So if that is, if expression, if it comes to expressions, then this is the difference. And what is the thermodynamic standard? Thermodynamic standard is the compound must be at 1 bar pressure, the compound must be pure, that's it. It can be at any temperature. Standard form of a temperature in thermodynamics is the compound must be at 1 bar pressure and the compound must be pure, nothing else. Okay. Now this is how we write down delta G and delta G naught for this reaction. First point. Now come to second point. Now in this second point you will understand everything about delta G and delta G naught. In fact, actually this topic is delta G versus delta G naught. Okay. Now in the second point we will analyze the difference between delta G and delta G naught in the form of a curve. For the same reaction A gives B. and on x-axis I am taking G, and on y-axis I am taking Xi, which indicates the extent of reaction. So this is the graph between G and Xi. Now we can define delta G, the same delta G which we defined this way, the same delta G can be written as dG upon dxi, the slope of the curve which is obtained between G and Xi. And for a reaction, almost for any reaction, its behavior is like this. The slope of this curve at any point from here to here, see, starting with pure A and getting pure B, starting point of the reaction and end point of the reaction, when the reaction goes to completion. So here we have pure A, and with time amount of A goes on decreasing and amount of B goes on increasing, and here we have pure B. So extent of reaction 0. Extent of reaction 0 means reaction has not started, so pure A, and extent of reaction 1 means the reaction is complete, reaction is finished, no A but B complete. Okay. So delta G is equal to dG upon dxi. Now see, now listen to me carefully. Suppose you are at this particular point. Actually, there is some extent of reaction. After some time, maybe after 10 minutes, maybe after 5 minutes, from the beginning of the reaction. Now, delta G at that point is negative. dG upon dxi, slope is negative. So delta G is negative at that particular point. Okay, we started with A and we hope to prepare B. But of course, because it is a reversible reaction, you won't get complete B, because the system comes to equilibrium before that. At some point of time, the system comes to equilibrium. Now, suppose if you are at this particular point where slope is 0, minimum, and at that particular point of time, the system is at equilibrium. And suppose if you are at this point, actually when you start with A, you won't reach this point because the system stops here. But by doing work from outside, you can bring the system to this point, and at that point we can say delta G is positive. So here at this point delta G is negative, and at that point delta G is positive at this particular point, and at this particular point delta G is equal to 0. Slope is 0. Here the slope is negative, here the slope is positive, and here it is 0. Okay. Now for example, you start with B, we can do that. You all know equilibrium can be established from either direction. Starting with A, you will reach equilibrium. Starting with B, you will reach the same point equilibrium. This we learnt in chemical equilibrium long back. Okay. Suppose if you start with B, so now the direction is from right to left. So if you do that, then at this particular point of time, for example, at this particular point, delta G is negative, and suppose if you come to this particular point starting from B, and if you reach this point, actually this point is not obtained naturally because the system stops here. You started here and the system comes here and it stops because the system reaches equilibrium. The reaction becomes reversible. There is no way system crosses this point and coming this way. If you don't do any work externally, but if you do work externally, yes, we can reach here. So here the delta G is positive because the slope is positive in this direction if you see from this direction. So here actually these arrows, these two arrows, white colored, spontaneous direction. These two arrows, that pink colored arrows, non-spontaneous direction. Now let me write here. For white colored arrows, delta G is equal to negative, and for this pink colored arrows, delta G is equal to positive. And there is one arrow which, there is no arrow actually, the minimum represents the equilibrium position. And you know delta G negative means spontaneous, and delta G positive means non-spontaneous. System goes in that direction on its own. System can go in that direction, but only by doing some external work. Only when we do some external work. System naturally does not go in that direction, non-spontaneous. Now suppose if you see this arrow, no, system does not go in that direction. And if you see this arrow, no, system does not go in that direction. But we can make it go in that direction by doing some external work. That is what is non-spontaneous direction. Suppose you recall, all of you, electrolytic cell. Electrolytic cell, the system goes in this direction only, a non-spontaneous direction. But we do work from outside. We do electrical work. So that is the reason the system is going in a non-spontaneous direction. And on the other hand, suppose if you come to galvanic cell, in galvanic cell the system goes in the natural direction, that is spontaneous. So for a reaction which happens in a galvanic cell, delta G is negative. For a reaction which happens in an electrolytic cell, delta G is positive. But in electrolytic cell also we are making the reaction happen, but only by doing external work. And there we are doing electrical work, external source of power. With the help of only that electrical work, we are making a non-spontaneous reaction happen. But the reaction does not happen on its own. Naturally, it does not happen. Okay. Now, the question is, who decides the spontaneity? Delta G or delta G naught? It is obviously delta G. From here to here, you see, from starting point until the system reaches equilibrium, at any point, the process is spontaneous, irreversible. From here to here, in this direction, from left to right, from this point to this point, at any point, the process is non-spontaneous. It does not happen on its own. But you can make it happen, that is a different thing. But the system does not, the process does not happen on its own. Now, suppose from you, if you start from B, you see from right to left, then from here to here, yes, spontaneous direction, irreversible. Once you reach here, yes, equilibrium. And from this point to this point, non-spontaneous direction. From, if you see from right to left direction. So, it is delta G which decides spontaneity. Then what is delta G naught on this graph? Simple. Now, this is the G naught of A. On x-axis we have taken G, and this is the G naught of A, and this is the G naught of B. So, the difference between these two. Now, this is delta G naught. That is delta G naught. So, I can say for a given reaction like this, we have one delta G naught at a given temperature. But at the same temperature, the same reaction has infinite delta G values. You see, from here to here, from the beginning to the end, there are so many points, infinite number of points, and at each point, the system has unique delta G value. So, any reaction has infinite number of delta G values at a given temperature. but the reaction has only one delta G naught value at that particular temperature. And you all know this delta G naught is related to equilibrium constant like this, minus RT ln K equilibrium. If delta G naught is negative, K equilibrium is greater than 1. If delta G naught is positive, K equilibrium is less than 1. That is the meaning of delta G naught. That means if delta G naught is negative for a reaction, products predominate over reactants. If delta G naught is positive, reactants predominate over products. So K equilibrium less than 1 or K equilibrium greater than 1 or K equilibrium is equal to 1. That is decided by delta G naught. But spontaneity is decided by delta G. And let me conclude this topic with one particular analysis. Actually, I will give you a statement and you tell me whether that statement is correct or not. A reaction with positive delta G naught can be spontaneous at the beginning. Similarly, a reaction with negative delta G naught can be non-spontaneous at the end. Now let me explain these two statements with the help of two graphs. Come to the first statement. And when delta G naught is positive, that means K equilibrium is less than 1. Then G versus Xi graph, it looks like this. The system reaches equilibrium very soon. It is like this, G versus Xi. That means whatever reactant you have taken, majority of that reactant remain unreacted when the system reaches equilibrium. That is what is meant by delta G naught positive, K equilibrium less than 1. That means maximum amount of the reactant is in the form of reactant only when the system reaches equilibrium. The minimum in the curve reaches very soon, very early. Okay. But in that particular reaction where for the delta G naught is positive, you see this? Delta G naught positive. G naught of the product is greater than G naught of the reactant. So delta G naught is positive. Okay. So if you see at this particular point, for example, if you see at this particular point, so now tell me whether the reaction is spontaneous or not. Yes, because delta G is negative, the slope is negative. So that is the meaning of this one. A reaction with positive delta G naught can be spontaneous at the beginning. Okay, now suppose if you see another graph for the second statement. Now it is like this. The system reaches equilibrium very late. That means majority of the reactant has been converted into the product. Products predominate. K equilibrium greater than 1. Delta G naught negative. Obviously here you see delta G naught negative because G naught of the product is less than G naught of the reactant. So delta G naught negative. But you just see what happens here. At this particular point, what happens? Reaction is non-spontaneous. Because we have gone beyond that reversible, beyond that equilibrium point, and after that reaction becomes non-spontaneous. So delta G naught positive or delta G naught negative, that does not indicate the spontaneity of a reaction. Spontaneity of the reaction is given by delta G, not delta G naught. Delta G naught only tells us about who will predominate, reactants or products. If delta G naught is positive, equilibrium constant is less than 1. If delta G naught is negative, equilibrium constant is greater than 1, and if delta G naught is equal to 0, which rarely happens, equilibrium constant is equal to 1. Equilibrium constant is equal to 1 means almost half of the reactant is converted into product. Okay. Now this is the third point in the second law. Now let us solve some questions, actually 5 or 6 questions. The maximum number of questions were asked in JEE Advanced, one or two questions in JEE Mains. Now let me discuss these 5 to 6 questions. Actually first you see the question, you try for yourself, give it at least 2 trials, listen to me carefully, give it at least 2 trials. And after that, no matter whether you can solve it or not, you see my solution. Don't forget to see my solution, even if you can solve it, then also go through my solution. So first see the question, take your own time, try it, give it a minimum of 2 trials, then only you watch my solution. So like this actually I am going to discuss 5 to 6 questions, and they cover almost all the aspects of second law of thermodynamics. All the 6 questions, they are based on only second law of thermodynamics. Now let us see some questions. Now this is the first question which I am analyzing. Now this is the question which is asked in JEE Mains 2019. Now you are given a reaction X gives Y, and delta R G naught for that reaction is given in terms of an expression, algebraic expression, 120 minus 3 by 8 into T. Then he is asking at a temperature, at a particular temperature, which component predominates, the major component in the reaction mixture. Okay. Now actually here, what do you mean by this delta R G naught? What does that symbol small r signify? What does it indicate? Reaction. See, actually in thermodynamics, all thermodynamic functions, internal energy, enthalpy, entropy, free energy. So in thermodynamics, in the entire thermodynamics, there are 2 types of delta U, 2 types of delta H, 2 types of delta G, 2 types of delta S. One type is simply delta U. You take a substance, from initial state to final state, you change the pressure, you change the temperature, you change the volume. So what is the change in internal energy? So that is simply called as delta U. Change in the internal energy of a particular substance. But suppose if there is a reaction, products are formed, reactants are consumed, and in that reaction, what is the change in internal energy? That means internal energy of the products minus internal energy of the reactants, and that change is called as delta RG, delta RU, delta RH. So when there is a reaction, in a reaction what is the change in the thermodynamic property, and for that change we use R. Okay. Now here delta RG naught is given. It is not delta RG, it is delta RG naught. And just now we discussed what is the difference between delta G naught and delta G? So delta G naught will tell you about the equilibrium constant. It does not tell you about the spontaneity. So which species predominate? Simple. Suppose you see option A, 280 Kelvin temperature. Then who will predominate, X or Y? If you substitute 280 here, you will get this delta R G naught, maybe positive or maybe negative. Calculate and see that. If delta R G naught comes out to be positive in the option A, X predominates. Because delta R G naught positive means equilibrium constant less than 1. The majority of the reactant is left unreacted. So the reactant predominates. Okay, if delta R G naught is negative, the product predominates. Of course, in all the options, it is like this. You substitute the temperatures and you see whether delta R G naught comes out to be positive or negative. If it comes out to be positive, the reactant predominates. If it comes out to be negative, the reactant, product predominates. Because if it comes out to be negative, the equilibrium constant is greater than 1. The extent of reaction is more than half. More than half of the reactant is converted into product. If delta R G naught is positive, then equilibrium constant is less than 1. That means majority of the A remains unreacted. So this way you can solve this question. Now this is the second question, which was asked in 2016 JEE Advance. We have an ideal gas, moles is given, temperature is given 300 Kelvin, thermal contact with surroundings, they expand isothermally, volume change is given against a constant external pressure of 3 atm. And what he is asking is entropy change in surroundings. That is what is asked. Okay, in joule per Kelvin. Okay. Now actually in thermodynamics second law, calculating entropy change in the system is somewhat easier. But calculating entropy change in the surroundings comparatively little difficult. And you may commit silly mistakes in that. Okay. Now let me solve this question. Suppose if you come to the system, first if you come to the system, then there is an expansion isothermal against constant external pressure. So now can I write down work done by the system, because it is expansion, that is equal to minus P external delta V, and all of you see the work is done in reversible process or irreversible process. Irreversible, because the work is done against a constant external pressure of 3 atm. So it is clearly an irreversible process, and for an irreversible process work done formula is minus P external into delta V. So now we can substitute the values. Minus 3 atm into the volume change, final minus initial, 1 liter. Now that is equal to minus 3 liter atm. Now if you want to convert this into joules, then 1 liter atm is equal to 101.3 joules. So you can say minus 303.9 joules. Now this is the amount of work done by the system. Okay, if this is the work done, then what will be the Q value? The heat transferred from surroundings to the system, because work is done by the system, and in order to keep temperature constant, because it is an isothermal process, in order to keep temperature constant, the same amount of energy must be transferred from surroundings to the system in the form of heat. So the heat must be equal to 303.9 joules. So this is everything from system point of view, but we want delta S surroundings. So now can I write down Q is equal to minus Q surroundings. You all know in thermodynamics, if nothing is mentioned, if there is no subscript, see I have written just Q, that means it is the Q of system. When nothing is mentioned, by default we take that property to be of the system, not surroundings. When the examiner means about surroundings, then he gives us, you see, delta S surroundings. Okay, this is the work done by the system, this is the heat energy flown into the system, and this is heat energy of the surroundings. So Q is equal to minus Q surroundings. So, and then I can write down delta S surroundings is equal to Q surroundings upon temperature. And he is saying it is in thermal contact with the surroundings. So, system and surroundings are at same temperature. It is in thermal contact and the process is isothermal. So, obviously the system and surroundings are at the same temperature. So, now we can write down Q surroundings will be minus 303.9 joules and the temperature is 300. Now it comes out to be minus 1.013 joules. Now this is the answer. But one point you here all of you please mind it. Delta S is equal to Q upon T. In that formula the Q must be reversible. Delta S is equal to Q reversible upon T. But here the process that occurred is irreversible process. That is the reason why we use this formula. But actually we calculated delta S surroundings here, not delta S system. So in system the process might be irreversible. But from the surroundings point of view, every process is reversible because surroundings are enormous. Whatever may be the change in the surroundings, that can be taken as reversible process because enormity of the surroundings. So maybe the process, the expansion is irreversible from system point of view, but we can definitely use this formula because every process is reversible process from surroundings point of view. So temperature is 300 Kelvin, same inside and outside, system surrounding temperature is same, and Q surroundings we got from Q system. Q system we got from the work done. It is in a isothermal process, so magnitude of work done and heat must be same. So this is the final answer, minus 1.013 joules. Now you see the third question. Actually this question was asked in JEE Advance 2017. Actually here delta G naught values of graphite and diamond are given. You know, for carbon the standard state is graphite only, and he has given conversion of diamond to graphite reduces the volume by some amount, some meter cube per mole. You see the units. That means if you take 12 grams of graphite, you convert that entire amount into diamond. That means 12 grams of diamond. Then the volume decreases by that amount. Okay. And then he is asking the pressure at which graphite comes into equilibrium with diamond. So this is the question. Okay. Now we can solve it like this. Actually all of you know G is equal to H minus Ts by definition. Now we can write down dz is equal to dH minus TdS minus SdT. Now we can write down in the place of dH du plus PdV plus VdP minus TdS minus SdT. I have used the definition of H. H is equal to U plus PV. Now, let me introduce first law. So, I can write down dq plus dw, and dw can be written as minus pdv, expansion work. So, plus pdv plus vdp minus tds minus sdt. Minus pdv and plus pdv get cancelled. dq is nothing but equal to TDS. So, dq and minus TDS get cancelled. Of course, for a reversible process. Temperature is constant, isothermal. So, SDT becomes 0. So, then we are left with one thing, that is dz is equal to VdP. Okay. Now, suppose if you integrate this. This is a infinitesimally small change in the G value of a substance. That is not dRg. That is not the change of free energy of a reaction. It is the free energy, change in free energy of a particular substance. So, here we have started with graphite, and we are converting by applying pressure. At some pressure, we are converting this graphite into diamond, and we want the pressure at which these two come into equilibrium with each other. So, if you integrate between the limits standard conditions, 1 bar pressure and at a pressure P, the pressure at which the system comes to equilibrium. So, we can write down dz is equal to volume remains constant. Actually, graphite and diamond both are solids. If you apply pressure, if you decrease pressure or increase pressure, there is hardly any change in the volume of a solid. So, volume can be taken out of the integral. So, again the same limits, standard pressure 1 bar and a pressure P. So, we can write down dP. Now, this can be written as G minus G naught. G is the free energy at a pressure P, and G naught is the pressure G at 1 bar pressure. So, G minus G naught is equal to V into delta P, and in delta P we have initial pressure and final pressure. In final G, that is at P, and initial G, that is at 1 bar pressure. So, we can write down P minus 1. So, initial pressure, that means G naught at 1 bar pressure, G at a pressure P. And we can rearrange this as G is equal to G naught plus V into P minus 1. Okay. Now, let us come to the actual question. Actually, we got a relation between G and G naught for a particular substance. Now, if you apply this particular relation, the final relation to the graphite and diamond, we can write down G of diamond is equal to G naught of diamond plus volume of diamond into P minus 1. Similarly, G of graphite is equal to G naught of graphite plus volume of graphite into the same P minus 1, because the pressure is the pressure of the system, the entire system. You do not have different pressure for graphite and diamond. P is the pressure of the system which we are applying in order to convert graphite into diamond. So, P is same for both diamond and graphite, and 1 bar standard pressure is same for both of them. And this is the volume of 1 mole of diamond. This is the standard free energy of 1 mole of diamond. This is the free energy at a pressure P of 1 mole of diamond. Hello, please remember. Similarly, this is the volume of 1 mole of graphite, 12 grams of graphite. This is the free energy, standard free energy for 1 mole of graphite. this is the free energy at a pressure P for 1 mole of graphite. Molar free energy, standard molar free energy, molar volume. Okay. Now we can write down delta G. That means G graphite minus G diamond. For this reaction, actually graphite gives diamond. For that reversible reaction, we can write down G diamond minus G graphite, that is equal to G naught diamond plus V diamond into P minus 1 minus G naught graphite plus V graphite into the same P minus 1. Now this is the G value of diamond and this is the G value of graphite. Okay, now we can write down this is equal to, this can be written as delta G. In fact, that is delta Rg. Delta Rg, it is for a reaction, and G naught diamond minus G naught graphite. We can write down that is delta R G naught. And here what is the reaction? Reaction is, let me write down here, that is graphite in equilibrium with diamond. So delta Rg is nothing but G of diamond minus G of graphite. Delta Rg naught means G naught of diamond minus G naught of graphite. Okay, now we can write down plus V diamond minus V graphite into P minus 1. Now, if you substitute the values, delta Rg, we require pressure at which diamond and graphite come into equilibrium. So, at equilibrium, what is the delta Rg? 0. So, 0 is equal to delta Rg naught. G naught of diamond is given to you, G naught of graphite is given to you. So, delta R G naught is 2900 joules per mole plus he has given the volume change. If graphite is converted into diamond isothermally, the conversion of diamond to graphite reduces the volume by 2 into 10 power minus 6. Conversion of diamond to graphite, but we have written the reaction graphite to diamond. So that V diamond minus V graphite will be minus 2 into 10 power minus 6 meter cube per mole into P minus 1. Delta Rg naught is in joules per mole. This volume change is in meter cube per mole. So whatever value of P you will get, that you will get in pascals, and he has given you the relation between bar and pascals. He has given all the options in bar. So you convert the pascals, pressure in pascals into pressure in bar. That is the final pressure. And see, actually here we got this delta G. This delta G is for a substance. This delta Rg is for a reaction. You please make a difference between those two. That is the meaning of this particular subscript R. It is for a reaction. So this is how this question can be solved. Now you see this particular question. This is also the question which was asked in JEE Advance 2004. This question was asked as a subject question. No options. Okay. Here again formation free energies, standard free energies of formation of N2O4 and NO2 both are given, and he is saying that he has taken 5 moles each of those two compounds. So he is asking us delta G as well as the direction in which the reaction is shifted. Okay. Now if you actually direction in which the reaction is shifted, we can decide that direction, forward or backward, we can decide that in 2 different ways. We have complete data for both the ways. So we can use either way to decide the direction. Okay, now you see. Now you see the first one. First let me calculate delta G. Delta G is equal to delta G naught plus RT ln Q. And Q is the reaction quotient. Okay, so delta G naught for this reaction is nothing but 2 into delta F G naught of NO2 minus delta F G naught of for N2O4. Now this is what is delta G naught. In fact, both are delta R G and delta R G naught, because the reaction is involved. It is not the free energy change of a substance, it is the free energy change during a reaction. Free energies of products minus free energies of reactants. So it is better to introduce R here. Although in the question it is not given, but it is definitely delta R G, no doubt at all. Okay, plus R value 8.314 joule per mole per Kelvin into temperature is given to you 298 into 298 Kelvin and into ln Q, and Q is the reaction coefficient. You know, all of you, the expression for reaction quotient and the expression for equilibrium constant both are same. The only difference is that if you take the values at equilibrium, if you substitute the values at equilibrium, you will get the equilibrium constant, and if you substitute the values at any other point other than equilibrium, then you will get reaction quotient. And you all know in this formula, listen to me very carefully, one important point. When you substitute the values in the reaction quotient, we have to substitute pressure in bar for a gas, molarity for a solution, 1 for both a pure liquid and a pure solid. Let me repeat. For a gas, you have to substitute the pressure in bar, not pressure in pascals, it should be pressure in bar. And for a solution, molarity, moles per liter. For pure solid and pure liquid, it is 1. So if that is the case, then you see here you have taken 5 moles each, equimolar mixture, total pressure is 20 bar. So pressure of NO2 and pressure of N2O4 both must be 10 bar each initially. So it is ln 10 into 10 upon 10. So from this you will get delta RG. Delta RG naught, that is 0. 2 into 50 minus 100, it is 0. And this entire value, if you calculate that, it comes out to be positive, because ln 10 is 2.303 and temperature is positive, R is positive, so you will get a positive value. So definitely whatever may be the magnitude of this, but it is positive. So what do you mean by delta RG positive? Spontaneous or non-spontaneous? Obviously it is spontaneous. So that means you can say, if you represent this particular analysis on a graph that is between G and Xi, now you will get something like this, and we are somewhere here because delta G is positive, we are somewhere there. So obviously if you see from left to right, then it is non-spontaneous. But if you see from right to left, it is spontaneous. So the direction of change is, and if you write down the reaction in the given direction, N2O4, that gives 2NO2. Then under these conditions, the direction of the reaction is backward. Now this is a spontaneous direction. That means net conversion of NO2 into N2O4. And I already told you, actually, whether the reaction is shifted in the forward direction or backward direction, that you can decide in another way, very simple way. Now if K equilibrium is greater than Q equilibrium, now Q, just Q, reaction coefficient, Q is smaller than K equilibrium, forward direction. And if K equilibrium is less than Q, that means Q is greater than K equilibrium, backward direction, because the Q tends to become K. Okay. And if K equilibrium is equal to Q, then the system is at equilibrium. So if you can calculate Q here, that is 10 into 10 upon 10, that is equal to 10. And if you calculate K equilibrium, that is equal to 1, because delta R G naught is 0. Delta R G naught is equal to minus RT ln K. And if delta R G naught is equal to 0, then obviously K equilibrium comes out to be 1. So that means K equilibrium is less than Q in this case. Q is 10, K equilibrium is 1. So obviously it is in the backward direction, because Q tends to become K. And that can happen only when the reaction is shifted in the backward direction. So this is the delta G value. If you calculate that, you will get the delta G. And if you come to the direction, then the direction is backward. NO2 converted into N2O4. Now let us see this question, fifth question. Entropy value for ethyl alcohol is given to you under some conditions. At this temperature, vapor pressure of the same ethyl alcohol is also given. Delta H vaporization is also given. And he is asking the entropy of the gaseous ethyl alcohol, that means ethyl alcohol vapor under the same conditions, 1 atm pressure and 25 degrees Celsius. Actually, you can solve this question in two different ways. And listen to me carefully. First, actually, in the first method, C2H5OH liquid in equilibrium with C2H5OH vapor, gaseous state. Now for this reaction, can you calculate equilibrium constant using any of the data given in the question? Can you calculate the equilibrium constant of that reaction? C2H5OH liquid to C2H5OH vapor. We can calculate equilibrium constant using this particular data, vapor pressure of that particular ethyl alcohol. Actually, in fact, there is no calculation. Vapor pressure of ethyl alcohol itself is the equilibrium constant for that reaction. So Kp for this reaction is equal to the vapor pressure of ethyl alcohol, that is equal to 59 mm of Hg. Actually, in fact, how do you write down this Kp expression for this reaction? It is nothing but pressure of C2H5OH vapor, and that is vapor pressure, because this is a pure liquid, and in equilibrium constant expression, the activity of pure liquid is 1. So its Kp is nothing but equal to pressure of ethyl alcohol, and that is the vapor pressure. So we got the equilibrium constant. Next, what we do? We can use this formula, delta G naught is equal to minus RT ln Kp. Actually, for a gas, the value which we substitute here must be its pressure in bar. For a liquid, it is 1. For a pure liquid, it is 1. Yes, it is pure liquid. So now if you substitute the values here, minus 8.314 into the temperature is 25 degrees Celsius, yes. So 298 into ln, the pressure must be in bar, okay, and we have the pressure in mm of Hg. So ln 59 upon 760. Now this is how we get delta G naught. Now you can write down delta G naught is equal to delta H naught minus T delta S naught. And here delta S naught is nothing but equal to S naught of ethyl alcohol vapor, C2H5OH vapor minus S naught of C2H5OH liquid. Now ethyl alcohol vapor entropy at 1 atm, that is standard entropy. So this is asked. Ethyl alcohol liquid entropy at 1 bar pressure and standard entropy. 1 atm is almost equal to 1 bar, so no problem. So this is given to you. Now we require this, and we get this delta S naught from this expression. We know delta G naught, we know temperature, and you come to the delta H naught, and you see that language. Its enthalpy of vaporization is given, but we require standard enthalpy of vaporization. So can we substitute that 10.19 kilocalories directly here? Can we do that? We can do that, because you see, for a liquid, not only ethyl alcohol, for any liquid, we can say delta H, that means enthalpy change at any pressure, is equal to enthalpy change at 1 bar pressure. But of course, if the vapor behaves ideally, assuming the vapor to behave ideally. Can you agree? Do you agree with this? For any liquid, delta H is equal to delta H naught. Enthalpy change at any pressure is equal to enthalpy change at 1 bar pressure. Yes, just imagine all of you. Delta H at any other pressure. Delta H at a pressure other than 1 bar. That means you take the liquid at, for example, 0.5 atm pressure. You convert that entire liquid into ethyl alcohol vapor again at 0.5 atm pressure. Yeah, 0.5 bar pressure. So what is the enthalpy change in that process? That is delta H. Now 0.5 atm to 0.5 atm, liquid and vapor both are at 0.5 atm. The enthalpy change involved is delta H. Now if you bring this vapor from 0.5 to 1 bar, let us bring this vapor into to 0.5 to 1 bar. Now let me make you visualize like this. H of liquid that gives H of vapor. Non-standard conditions, 0.5 atm. Now first let me convert this H liquid into H naught liquid. Then let me convert this H naught liquid into H naught vapor. Then let me convert this H naught vapor into H vapor. Now the gas is ideal. So what is the change in enthalpy when the pressure of an ideal gas is changed, keeping the temperature constant? 0. So the enthalpy change during this particular process is 0. And here you applied pressure on a particular liquid. So the enthalpy change during that process is almost 0, because there is no change in volume when you apply pressure on a liquid. If there is no change in volume, there is no change in temperature, so enthalpy change can be taken to be 0. So for both these steps, the delta H value is 0. That is the reason delta H is equal to delta H naught. but provided the gas behaves ideally, then only. Okay. So then you can use directly that value here. You know delta G naught, which comes from this expression. We know temperature 298 Kelvin. We know delta H naught, that is 10.19 kilocalories. So you substitute all those, you will get delta S naught, and from that you will get the S naught of the ethyl alcohol vapor. Now another way in which you can solve this question is, now see, we can write down delta S is equal to delta H upon T. Can we do that? Yes, we can do that provided two conditions are satisfied. First condition is the process is reversible. Yes, the process is reversible, no problem. And the second one is pressure is constant. Because the actual formula of delta S is Q reversible upon T. And Q can be replaced with delta H only when pressure is constant. Yes, pressure is constant. And process is reversible, so we can write this one. And you know, actually for all reversible process phase change, this is the formula. Delta S vaporization is equal to delta H vaporization upon temperature. Now this delta S is nothing but S ethyl alcohol vapor minus S ethyl alcohol liquid. Now S ethyl alcohol liquid can be replaced with S naught ethyl alcohol liquid. Because entropy of a liquid at 1 bar pressure, entropy of a liquid at 0.5 bar pressure, almost same. Because when you apply pressure, there is no change in volume. Keeping the temperature constant, if you change only pressure, there is almost no change in volume. So why entropy changes? So S for a liquid is equal to S naught for a liquid. Delta H for a liquid is equal to delta H naught for a liquid if its vapor is considered to be ideal. So then we are given this value, and from this you can calculate S for C2H5OH. But now we require S naught. S for a gas and S naught for a gas is different. Because when you apply pressure, volume of a gas changes. Volume of a liquid does not change, but volume of a gas changes. Because gases are compressible. So for a gas it makes a difference whether the conditions are standard or non-standard, but for a liquid it does not matter. So, and for a vapor we can calculate this delta S is equal to S naught C2H5OH vapor minus S C2H5OH vapor, and that is given by NR ln initial pressure, that is 0.59 upon 760, final pressure 1 bar. So final conditions, standard conditions, initial conditions at other pressure, that is the vapor pressure is 59 mm of Hg. At that pressure we got the entropy, but we require the entropy at 1 bar pressure. So delta S formula NR ln P1 upon P2, initial pressure upon final pressure. So initial pressure is 59 mm of Hg upon 760, it is 59 not 0.59, and final pressure is 1 bar. So from this you will calculate the S naught of ethyl alcohol. So this is one way of solving, that is another way of solving. Now actually at the beginning of this session I told you analysis and practice. So this is how you analyze actually the question. Actually in this question temperature versus entropy graph is given, and it is a cyclic process, and he is saying that within the cycle the absolute temperature changes n fold, n times. It is increasing or decreasing n times temperature. Okay, and he is asking the efficiency of the cycle. So you all know efficiency of a cycle is equal to the work done upon heat absorbed. How much heat is given to the system and how much work is done by the system, the ratio is the efficiency. Okay. Now you observe this graph carefully. Suppose if you represent this point with A, this with B and this with C. So it is a cyclic process A, B, C, A. Now if you observe from A to B, both temperature as well as entropy are increasing. So that means the system is absorbing heat in that process from the source, from outside source. Now from B to C, if you see, entropy is constant but temperature is decreasing. You all know any process which is depicted on a graph, which is plotted on a graph, is reversible, because you know irreversible process cannot be plotted. So here A to B is reversible, B to C is reversible, and C to A is also reversible. And in a reversible path, entropy remains same. Now can I say the path BC is adiabatic? dq is equal to 0. When dq is equal to 0, ds is also equal to 0. So isoentropic path is adiabatic. So B to C is adiabatic. We can decide that for sure. And from C to A, temperature remains constant but entropy is decreasing. So obviously the system is losing heat in that process. So it is absorbing heat in the process A to B, some amount, and out of that some amount is converted into work, and the rest of the heat is released in the process C to A. Okay. Now he is asking the efficiency, work done upon heat absorbed. You know, work done is nothing but equal to heat absorbed minus heat released. System has absorbed suppose 100 kilojoules of heat, system released 50 kilojoules of heat to the surroundings, to the sink. So the work done is nothing but 100 minus 50. So the same efficiency can be written is equal to heat absorbed minus heat released upon heat absorbed. Now, how do you get the heat from temperature entropy curve? It is nothing but area under the curve. See, work done is equal to PdV, and amount of work done is given by the area under the PV plot. Q is equal to TdS, and magnitude of the entropy is given by the area under the TS plot. So area under AB line is nothing but the heat absorbed. Area under the CA line is nothing but heat released. So we can substitute that. Now actually here heat absorbed minus heat released. Area under AB minus area under CA, that is nothing but area under area of that triangle. So now that can be written as half into change in entropy, that means the length of this particular line, let us say it is delta S, and change in temperature. He is saying that temperature changes n-fold. If the temperature at C is T, temperature at B is n into T, because temperature is changing n times. So the change in temperature is Nt minus T upon now Q absorbed. Q absorbed will be the area under this line AB. So that is area of the triangle plus area of this particular rectangle. So it is 1 by 2 into delta S into Nt minus T. This is the area of the triangle, and plus area of this particular rectangle, that is delta S into this is delta S, and the temperature change here it is 0 and here it is T. So temperature change is T. So delta S into T. Now if you solve, you will get that efficiency. Of course delta S get cancelled, and you will get the efficiency in terms of N. Now see, let me repeat the concepts here. Temperature and entropy both are increasing, so heat is absorbed. Temperature remains same, entropy is decreasing, so heat is released. Temperature is changing, temperature is in fact decreasing, and entropy remains same. So adiabatic, isoentropic, heat Q is 0. So from B to C, there is no change in Q. Heat is neither absorbed nor released because it is isoentropic, reversible process in which entropy is same, constant. So it is isoentropic, so it is adiabatic. And efficiency is defined by work done upon heat absorbed. So now this is how this question can be solved.